If a bank tells you that you can afford a house in 2026, that may be the most dangerous compliment you hear all year. I mean, that literally a great many families are walking into the housing market believing they are making an adult decision, a responsible decision, a wealth building decision, when in truth they are stepping into a machine that can quietly drain the next 10 or 15 years of their life. The machine is not the house. The machine is the gap between what a lender is willing to approve and what your real life can safely carry. That gap is where marriages get stressed, retirement contributions disappear, emergency funds get hollowed out, and smart people turn into anxious people who suddenly need every paycheck to arrive on time. I have spent most of my life studying capital allocation, and one of the first things I learned is that a price tag tells you very little. What matters is the stream of cash required to own something, the durability of that cash stream, and the opportunity cost of sending your money there instead of somewhere else. That is why I've never looked at a house the way most people look at a house. Most people see granite countertops, school districts, a bigger yard, a better zip code, and a monthly payment that the bank says is acceptable. I see a long duration cash obligation attached to taxes, insurance, repairs, maintenance, and human hope. In 2026, hope has become very expensive. Mortgage rates around 6% changed the arithmetic. The median home price around $400,000 changed the starting line. Property taxes, insurance, HOA fees, and maintenance changed the fine print. And together they created a brutal truth that many Americans do not want to hear. The brutal truth is this: a lot of people are not one promotion away from affording the life they want. They are one misunderstanding away from locking themselves into a life they cannot comfortably sustain. When I look at the market now, I do not see a simple housing crisis. I see an affordability illusion. It works like this. The bank looks at gross income. Your life runs on net income. The bank cares whether it gets repaid. You care whether you still have enough left to live, save, invest, breathe, and sleep at night. Those are not the same thing. And if you confuse them, you can make six figures and still build a middle-class trap so efficient that it feels like a luxury purchase on day one and a slow financial hostage situation by year 3. I want to walk through this carefully because the numbers matter. Not the numbers in the way television talks about them. I mean the real numbers. The numbers that decide whether a house serves your family or whether your family ends up serving the house. The old bank rule most people hear is the 28 and 36 rule. The lender says your mortgage payment, including taxes and insurance, should be about 28% of your gross monthly income. Then it says all your debts together should stay under about 36% of gross income. That sounds clean, it sounds prudent, it sounds mathematical, and it creates some of the worst financial decisions in the country because it encourages a person to think that qualification is the same as affordability. It is not. Qualification is the lender asking one question: can I probably get my money back? Affordability is you asking a much harder question: can I still build a good life after I send the money out every month? That is why I prefer a much harsher lens. I want total housing costs kept around 30% of net income, not gross income. I want the number measured against what actually lands in your bank account after taxes, after retirement deductions, after the little disappearances that happen between salary and spendable money. Gross income flatters you, net income disciplines you. In markets like this, discipline matters more than optimism. Let me show you why. Take a $250,000 house in a healthier era. That might have sounded like the entry level dream. In 2026, even that so-called modest house can become a stress test. At a 20% down payment, you need $50,000 in cash before you even begin. That alone eliminates a shocking number of people, because the median savings in America is nowhere near that. If you do put 20% down, finance roughly $200,000 at 6% over 30 years. Principal and interest lands around $9,200 a month. Add property taxes and insurance and you are roughly in the $9,500 to $1,700 range. Use $1,600 as a working number, and suddenly the picture sharpens. The bank might bless that payment. If you make around $68,500 a year on a gross basis, your real life probably will not. To carry that payment while staying around 30% of net income, you are much closer to needing about $85,000 a year. That is the first mechanism. And I want you to remember it. I call it the gross income mirage. The gross income mirage is what happens when a lender hands you a number that looks affordable only because it was calculated using money you never actually get to keep. This mirage is one of the most expensive ideas in personal finance. It tells an $85,000 life that it can imitate a higher income life, and it tells a careful person that they are being too conservative, when in reality they are being honest. Now double the house. A $500,000 home is no longer some outlier fantasy in America. In many places, it is simply what a nice, ordinary family house costs. But ordinary price does not mean ordinary affordability at that level. 20% down is $100,000 cash. You finance about $400,000 at 6%. Principal and interest runs around $2,400 a month. Add taxes and insurance, and you're looking at something like $2,800 to $3,000 a month. Use $3,000, and now the illusion becomes much more dangerous. The bank says you may be able to qualify around $128,500 of gross annual income, but to keep that payment near 30% of net income, you are closer to needing around $160,000 gross. That is not a rounding error. That is not a tiny cautionary buffer. That is an entirely different class of household. And that is, before we discuss child care, commuting, student loans, car payments, elderly parents, medical surprises, or the simple fact that most people do not live inside a spreadsheet. This is the second mechanism. I call it the down payment cliff, the down. Payment cliff is the moment when a house price looks possible on paper, but the cash required to enter the deal tells the truth. A $100,000 down payment is not a cosmetic detail. It is a sorting mechanism. It determines who is using earned capital, who is using family capital, who is arriving with prior home equity, and who is attempting to stretch into a market without the financial shock absorbers that ownership now demands. A lot of younger buyers do not want to hear that. I understand it. But arithmetic does not negotiate with desire. If you need family help, say you need family help. If you are relying on inheritance, say you are relying on inheritance. If you are a dual income household earning serious money, say you are a dual income household earning serious money. The market is what it is. Shame does not help you. Clarity does. Now let us move to the $1 million house, because this is where aspiration and reality separate violently. In some parts of the country, $1 million buys a mansion in many coastal cities. It buys a regular house or even a condo that would have sounded laughably overpriced 20 years ago. That changes how people talk to themselves. They stop saying, I am considering a luxury property. They start saying, I am just trying to buy something normal where I live. Fine, but normal to the market is not the same as affordable to the household. At $1 million, 20% down means $200,000 cash. Finance roughly $800,000 at 6%, and your principal and interest sits around $4,796 a month. Add property taxes and insurance, and now you are around $5,800 to $6,300 a month. Call it $6,000. That single number should sober almost everyone. $6,000 a month does not ask whether the kitchen is beautiful. It does not care that the neighborhood has the right cafes. It does not care that the listing photos made your spouse emotional. It leaves your account every month with all the emotional detachment of gravity. Banks might let a household into that deal somewhere around $257,000 annual gross income. A more honest comfort threshold is closer to $320,000 gross income, and possibly more depending on tax load, and the rest of your life. At that level, you are no longer merely budgeting. You are entering a tax bracket reality. You may need a jumbo loan, you may need larger reserves, you may need better credit, you may need bonuses, equity compensation, or unusually reliable dual incomes. You may need a professional structure around your life that is itself vulnerable to economic changes. Now we are at the third mechanism. I call it the salary tier wall. The salary tier wall is what happens when home prices move out of the range where thrift alone can save you. Below a certain level, frugality matters a great deal. Above that level, income tier begins to dominate the conversation. This is very hard for disciplined middle-class people to accept because they have been told all their life that good habits can solve anything. Good habits solve a lot. They do not solve a house price that structurally belongs to the top slice of households. That is not a moral statement. It is a math statement. You can skip vacations, drive an older car, make coffee at home, and optimize subscriptions until your fingers fall off. But if the property you want requires $320,000 household income to feel manageable, then trying to hack your way there from a radically lower earnings base is not courage. It is self-deception. Now look at $2 million. This is where social media becomes outright dangerous. You will see clips of people touring homes at that level as if this is just a more ambitious version of ordinary adulthood. It is not. It is a different universe. A 20% down payment is $400,000 cash. The financed amount is about $1.6 million. Principal and interest alone is roughly $9,593 a month. Then come taxes, insurance, maintenance, maybe HOA, and suddenly total carrying costs can easily move into the $12,000 to $13,000 monthly range. A bank may bless this around $514,000 gross income. A more realistic comfort threshold may be around $700,000 gross income depending on tax rate, locality, and all the complexity that comes with households that earn that much. Think about that for a minute. $12,000 to $13,000 a month is not just a housing payment. It is a declaration of class position. It says you are playing a game where budgeting still matters, but the more important question is whether you belong to the income and asset tier that can sustain a shock, fund a lifestyle, save aggressively, and still remain unafraid of one bad year. This is the fourth mechanism. I call it the comfort fraud. The comfort fraud is the story people tell themselves when they can technically make the payment but cannot comfortably survive the life surrounding the payment. Comfort fraud is what makes a family say, "We can do it." Because the monthly debit clears, real comfort asks a different set of questions. Can you still invest seriously? Can you still absorb repairs? Can you still tolerate a bad bonus year? Can you still take a step back from work if your child needs you? Can one income carry the house for a period if the other disappears? Can you sleep? People underestimate how much financial stress converts a house from a shelter into a performance obligation. The house starts demanding that you remain in your current life, at your current income, with your current confidence, for far longer than the modern economy likes to guarantee. That is why I say again that many people are not buying a home. They are buying a required future version of themselves, and required future versions are dangerous purchases. They assume promotions not yet earned, bonuses not yet paid, rates not yet lowered, careers not yet secured, marriages not yet tested, and emergencies not yet seen. The house becomes affordable only if tomorrow behaves. Tomorrow has no contractual duty to behave. Now let me show you the fifth mechanism, because this is where the deepest mistake lives. I call it the ownership halo. The ownership halo is the belief that because something is called home ownership, it must automatically be wise, virtuous, and wealth building. I have watched this halo ruin judgment for decades. Home ownership can be wonderful. It can also be one of the most capital-consuming, flexibility, destroying, return, diluting decisions a person ever makes. A primary residence is not automatically a productive asset. It can appreciate. Fine. But it also demands capital constantly. It competes with investing, it locks geography, it amplifies local tax regimes, it introduces repair risk, it seduces people into measuring wealth by Zillow estimates instead of cash flow and compounding. Do not misunderstand me. I am not arguing against owning a home. I am arguing against moralizing it. If you buy a house that fits your finances, your temperament, and your time horizon, it can be a beautiful choice. If you buy a house because you are tired of renting shame, because the bank said yes, because your friends are buying, or because you want to look as if you have arrived, then the purchase is not financial, it is psychological. Psychological purchases are the most expensive kind because people defend them long after the math turns ugly. This is where many households get trapped. They buy a house based on qualification, then they furnish it to match the dream, then they upgrade their cars to match the driveway. Then they stop investing because the housing cost is higher than they admitted. Then they tell themselves equity will save them. Then a layoff, a medical issue, a divorce, a rate reset, a tax jump, or a repair bill arrives. Then the thing that was supposed to prove stability becomes the source of instability. I have no interest in talking to you like a motivational speaker here. I would rather be useful. So let me give you the operating system I would use if I were evaluating a house in 2026. First, never let gross income buy a net income obligation. Run the payment against the money that actually hits your account, not the flattering number on the offer letter, not the pre-bonus annual package, not the hopeful version, the real version. Second, price the whole house, not the mortgage. That means principal, interest, taxes, insurance, HOA, maintenance, utilities, commuting changes, furnishing creep, and the cost of the cash you are burying in the down payment. A lot of people act as if the house cost stops at closing. That is where the lifelong billing relationship begins. Third, Stress test the house against a weaker version of your life. What happens if one income goes away for 6 months? What happens if bonuses vanish? What happens if your property taxes rise? What happens if insurance becomes uglier? What happens if you need a roof? A house that works only in a sunny economy is not affordable. Fourth, compare the house to the life it displaces. How much investing power are you giving up? How much flexibility are you giving up? How many years of mobility are you giving up? How much entrepreneurial courage are you giving up because now you need the paycheck more than ever? The opportunity cost of a house is often larger than the down payment. It can be the future you stop being willing to pursue. Fifth, buy the boringly affordable house before you buy the emotionally satisfying house. People want the house that validates their progress. I want the house that leaves enough surplus to keep compounding. That surplus is not dead money. That surplus is the Freedom Fund. It is the thing that lets you invest through bad markets, survive layoffs, start businesses, help your children, and avoid becoming a servant to fixed expenses. 6. Refuse to let a house become your only story of wealth. If all your financial confidence depends on home equity continuing upward, then you do not own a diversified life, you own a localized bet with paint on it. Now let me get more pointed. A $250,000 house may require around $85,000 gross income to feel comfortable. A $500,000 house may require around $160,000. A $1 million house may require around $320,000. A $2 million house may require around $700,000. Those are not just house numbers. Those are social sorting numbers. They tell you why so many Americans feel disoriented. They tell you why the middle class feels squeezed, even when employment appears healthy on the surface. They tell you why family help, inheritance, prior equity, and dual incomes matter more than people admit. They tell you why many buyers feel late before they even begin. And they tell you the most important thing of all. The housing crisis is not merely that homes are expensive. It is that the distance between wages and carrying costs has become so wide that people are constantly being invited to purchase stress in the name of adulthood. That is the real crisis. Not everyone will like that sentence. It happens to be true. If you want a practical way to think, ask yourself 3 questions. Do I want this house because it strengthens my life? Or because it upgrades my identity? Can I still save, invest, and withstand shocks after I buy it? If this house never appreciated meaningfully, would I still call it a good decision? Those 3 questions will save you from more mistakes than any realtor, lender, or social media clip ever will. Because at bottom, buying a house is not just a property decision. It is a cash flow decision. It is a career decision. It is a marriage decision. It is a risk tolerance decision. It is a compounding decision. And in 2026, it is also a truth-telling decision. You can tell yourself the bank approved you, or you can tell yourself the payment fits the life you actually want to live. Those are 2 different stories. One story buys the maximum, the other story protects the future. I know which one I would rather own. I would rather own the smaller house and the larger life. I would rather own the house that leaves room for investing, room for bad luck, room for patience, room for self-respect. I would rather be a little embarrassed by how conservative I was than privately terrified by how aggressive I became. That is not timidity. That is intelligent capital allocation. And that brings me to the final test. When you stand in front of the numbers, do not ask what house the market says you deserve. Ask what house lets you remain free. If the answer is smaller than you hoped, accept it. If the answer requires waiting, wait. If the answer means renting longer while you build liquidity, then rent with pride and build liquidity. There is no medal for becoming house rich and life poor. There is no secret dignity in being approved to the edge. There is no compounding magic in suffocating your future so you can impress people who are not going to help you when the furnace dies or the job disappears. The threshold in front of you is not the front door of a property. It is the line between performing wealth and building it. A lender can qualify you for a mortgage. Only you can decide whether you are signing a home contract or a stress contract. That is the contract I want you to read with open eyes. Because if you get this decision right, a house becomes a platform for a good life. If you get it wrong, it becomes a very expensive lesson in the difference between what you can buy and what you can truly afford. And in 2026, that difference is where fortunes and peace of mind are won or lost.